First of all, thank you all for being here. Really appreciate your time today. My name is Amber Orr. I'm a staff analytics engineer at Rocket Money. And today I will be talking to you about the quote-to-cash system that we built that is used by the accounting team to automate end-of-month close. And also it was used to pass our first SOX audit with 0 deficiencies, which we are very happy about and hope to continue into the next year. The goals of this presentation are threefold. First, that you walk away with something that you can use to help the accounting or finance teams you interact with. Secondly, this provides a framework for what you can use to solve complex problems. Third, the tests that we've implemented will hopefully allow you to see what sort of complex testing you can add to your DBT project to make sure the production data is being written in a way that your team expects. Now, before diving into what we specifically built, let's make sure we're on the same page with what quote-to-cash means. Okay, so in basic terms, quote-to-cash is a system that's meant to track from purchase order all the way to payment. Let's start with a very simple example of a monthly coffee subscription. So you sign up for a monthly coffee subscription. Before you make a payment, on the accounting side, what we're going to see is an opening of a purchase order, creation of an invoice, generating of a revenue record, and opening of accounts receivable. Now, you're really enjoying your monthly coffee subscription, and so you make a successful payment shortly after that, which is going to lead to a cash entry appearing in the accounting table and negating of accounts receivable. Think of accounts receivable as your open balance. And so as soon as the invoice is in a closed state, your AR for that invoice should equal to 0 because we no longer expect you to pay us anything because you've made a successful payment. Now you're really loving your coffee subscription, so you're going to continue for a few months. Every month on the accounting side, we're going to see similar things happen. We're going to see the opening of an invoice, creation of a revenue record, and the opening of accounts receivable. After you make a payment, we're going to see a cash record created, and we're going to see closing accounts receivable such that after that successful payment, accounts receivable is going to net to 0. Now, eventually you get tired of your coffee subscription and you decide to cancel. We're sorry to see you go, but at that time on the accounting side, we're going to cancel out the purchase order because you no longer have an active coffee subscription. Now, this is a very simple example. We will talk through lots of other examples as we get into this. This is just to make sure we're all on the same page with, at a high level, what quote-to-cash is meant to track. Now that we're on the same page with what quote-to-cash is, let's talk about why we need it. So a few things. We wanted our system to be compliant with general accounting principles. And this is tracking someone through that accounting lifecycle process we talked about previously, from purchase orders, invoices, revenue, cash, and accounts receivable. Something that I'm sure you all can relate to is we wanted to have a single source of truth for financial information. I'm sure at one point in time, all of you have heard of different metrics being calculated in different ways by different teams that are all supposed to be the same thing. We do not want this to happen with our financial data. Whenever we are calculating revenue for a given month for our company, we want to make sure everyone is pulling it the exact same way and arriving at the exact same number. Whenever we initially built this system, we had auditability in mind. We wanted to make sure that we had a system that was audit-worthy and could pass an audit. After we were acquired, this became a thing we actually had to do. Now that we're a public company, we have to pass in a SOX audit every single year. We did our first one last year, again, 0 deficiencies. That's great. Going into this year, we hope to continue. And this system is what the auditors were looking at during the SOX audit. So now we talked about the what and the why. Let's get into the details. So step 1 in building out this system is understanding the different revenue streams. This is where we spent 80% of our time. And this was really a lot of work and required coordination with various members of our team. We started out talking to product engineering to understand all the different user flows that a user can encounter during our system. If we're building a system to track the money, we need to know at every step of the process where money is coming in, where it is going out, and what that all looks like. The other thing that we had to do is we also had to meet with the accounting team. After we outlined all the different user flows, we needed the accounting team to let us know what should happen on the accounting books. I have 0 financial background, and so I relied heavily on the accounting team to let me know what was supposed to happen when. For example, whenever someone has a payment failure, what happens in the app, their purchase order? What happens financially? Does it lead to a contra revenue? Or are we closing out AR? Are we attempting to bill again? What does it all look like? To make this slightly more complicated, as I'm sure you all have in your systems, we have multiple different data sources. We have data coming in from Production DB. We have data coming in from Stripe, which is our primary billing provider. We have data coming in from Apple and Google. So not only do we have to map all this out, we had to work with the engineering teams to understand when should we be pulling data from what source. Now, we talked in our monthly coffee example about someone successfully paying their invoice, and that is happy path. And we would love if that was the only situation we had to encounter. But as you all know, there are lots of other situations that can happen. One specifically, let's look at an example within Rocket Money. So in Rocket Money, a user signs up for a new premium subscription. On the accounting side, similar to our first example, we're going to create a purchase order. It's pretty standard. Next, an invoice is going to be finalized. And similarly on the accounting side, we're going to see an opening of invoice, opening of revenue, opening of AR. Unlike the coffee example, this user actually decides to cancel before they make a successful payment. And so on that side, we're going to see things happen a little differently. We're actually going to negate invoice, revenue, accounts receivable, and purchase order all in one foul swoop. Why? Because the user no longer has an active subscription. They never paid us, and so we not want to be counting revenue for that given invoice. Again, this is one example. Here's what it actually looked like. This is an actual output of a whimsical diagram. It's a diagramming tool very similar to Lucidchart for one revenue stream and one payment provider. We have 4 revenue streams and 3 different payment providers for one of those revenue streams to give you an idea of sort of the complexity we're talking about within this system. Building this out in a workflow diagram was a very powerful tool to make sure that everyone else is on the same page, especially for folks who aren't very technical. You don't want to show them code. They want something to look at. And so we did this in a way where it's color-coded based on what team they were coming from, what was impacted, and where we're pulling the data from. And this allowed us to have follow-up conversations with product, engineering, and accounting to make sure we were all on the same page about exactly what we were building and how we were building it, right? Which is pretty important because we only wanted to build this thing once. Of course, there are going to be updates that are going to be made. We want to make sure that we're starting with a pretty solid foundational baseline whenever we're building this. Again, 80% of your work is here. Assuming this process goes smoothly, everything else downstream should happen pretty smoothly. So after you have the requirements, now we go about building the models. This is something probably all of you are very familiar with. We actually, in our quote-to-cash system, uses every part of the DBT model. So we have seed files, we have staging files, we have intermediate files, and we have MARTs. Quote-to-cash actually uses quite a bit of intermediate tables. The way that we found to maintain this system was to break up the logic into more maintainable pieces versus having a MART that's like 5,000 lines long that no one can maintain. And so we have several intermediate layers that then feed into final MARTs. We have a final MART layer for every single piece of the accounting lifecycle and every single revenue stream and every single payment provider. If you ask yourself why, some of the payment providers, the logic is actually different, right? We have different data coming in from, let's say, Apple and Google than we do from Stripe in terms of what does a successful cash payment look like, what does a payment failure look like. And so because of that, we had to implement logic specific to those payment providers and those revenue streams. Now, another really great benefit of us building this in-house is that it allows us to pretty easily build custom business logic that is specific to our application. Our accounting team recognizes revenue on a monthly basis. We have premium plans that are actually annual. And so in quote-to-cash, what we've done is you're able to take those annual plans and divide those out into monthly revenue increments. We also took deferred revenue from Excel and put it into DBT, which made me very happy. An example of deferred revenue is, let's say we have an annual plan of $36. In month 1, we're going to recognize $3, and then the deferred revenue for that line item is going to be $33. It basically means that $33 we're going to recognize over the next 11 months. I do not know how the accounting team was doing Excel. They were doing it somehow, hats off to them, but I really enjoyed bringing this into DBT. Next is tracking accruals, which is something new that we've done within quote-to-cash. Our team recently launched a signature credit card. With that signature credit card, you earn points as you spend money. Whenever your statement closes, we actually bank those points into our reward system. So initially we built quote-to-cash, and we just had points at time of banking, which made it a little easier for us because there's only one line item we needed to worry about. The accounting team was like, hey, it'd be really cool if we could track accruals, which means that we're tracking points as users are spending money. And so we did it. We implemented a system where we are tracking accruals as users spend money and earn rewards. As soon as those rewards are banked or officially earned, we are then offsetting the accrual. And this is something that, again, as new requirements come up, we're able to build all that out in DBT. So as we build, we want to test. This is honestly my favorite part of what we've done, and I think this makes quote-to-cash extremely resilient, and it gives folks a lot of confidence in the output that quote-to-cash is producing. As you can imagine from what we've talked about previously, our system is a little complicated. We have lots of payment providers, we have lots of different revenue streams, and we are constantly making updates and changes to quote-to-cash. And so we wanted to ensure that we're building something where we aren't afraid of breaking something. And one way we've done this is by having a really comprehensive test suite. Now, as you can imagine, we have your typical tests, primary keys, not null accepted values. We also do something that maybe is a little different. We have business logic tests in DBT that run daily because the quote-to-cash system relies on certain assumptions about how the product will perform and what actions will happen at given times. One example of this is we have premium billing logic that determines when we're going to bill premium customers. That runs daily. If it does not run daily, it is a problem because it means we aren't billing people when we should be. And so we have a test to make sure that that is running every day. We also have another test that makes sure the invoices are set to their correct state. From the previous example, you can probably tell that the state of invoices is really important to our accounting team. If invoices are closed, it means AR should be set to 0. And if they are closed, they should be closed for one of a few reasons to include successful payment, payment failure, voids, etc. If those states are not in alignment, that could cause problems for our accounting system and for quote-to-cash specifically. Now, one great benefit is that whenever we have one of these tests fail, which we don't like that to happen, but let's be honest, we're going to have bugs tests fail, we actually work with our engineering teams to figure out what's going on. And the engineering teams now are really familiar with what accounting expects. And it's really created a really great relationship between analytics engineering, our software engineers, the accounting team, and our product folks. And so anytime there's a failure, we'll work with the engineering team, figure out what's going on. Maybe our test needs to be modified. Maybe there's a feature that's impacting the test we didn't expect. Or maybe we have a valid bug. And the engineering team works to make a fix, and then we make sure that everything is working as expected. During this time, the accounting team is always looped in. They were always aware of the bug, the impact to our books, and then the state of the fix from the engineering team. We also have accounting logic tests, which, again, I think are pretty cool. That could be just me. One of those is if account receivable equal to 0. This is a rule that has to be followed when invoices are closed. If AR is still open after the invoice is closed, that is a problem. The next test is to make sure that revenue equals cash. For our accounting model specifically, it is really important that those two things line up and those match.
Stream is no longer sharing. Excuse me 1 second.
Okay, accounting tests. These are also really cool, right? Anytime it fails, we'll work with the accounting team, figure out what's going on. I included a snapshot of what we have currently in our all jobs run. We have 3,000 tests. Now, these are not all quote-to-cash tests, but having a comprehensive test suite for everything that's running in production is really important to our team. And quote-to-cash is just a subset of those tests. But we do have lots of quote-to-cash tests. Now, of course, our team is not perfect. We try to ensure that we try to basically predict something that would cause a test failure and test for that, or logic that we would want to test. If we have a situation where something crops up during close that we didn't expect, then we work to implement a test after that to ensure that it's not going to happen again. So again, test everything. It's proven very valuable for us and our team. Next is maintaining without breaking. Quote-to-cash is going to be improved and changed as we make changes to our application. If we add new features, for example, the signature credit card, that required an entire new suite of models in DBT to support that on the accounting side. If we change features, for example, if we change how our premium feature works, that will likely also require changes to our accounting logic, depending on, again, what that change is. We talked a little bit about our test suite, and I think that's a large part of what makes us confident that as we make changes, we aren't breaking anything. Another thing that we've done is really make this entire process auditable. We have lots of documentation. We really leverage DBT docs so that everyone understands what they're looking at, and that's been really important to make sure that everyone is on the same page. We use Shortcut, which is a feature tracking tool. It's very similar to Jira. To track all changes to quote-to-cash. So any change made to quote-to-cash, there's a ticket explaining exactly what we are changing. And the accounting team actually has to approve all of those changes. It's something that we implemented after we learned that we would have to go through a SOX audit. One tool that has really helped us in terms of having the accounting team sign off is Datafold. We talked about our test again. There's lots of ways to look at the way that production versus development environments look. Our accounting team isn't very technical, and so we needed a product that would easily allow them to see the differences between the development environment and production, and to be able to sign off that that changes what they expect. And Datafold allows us to do this. Here's just an example of the output of Datafold, but as you can see, it allows us to compare development with production. It allows us to see the primary keys that are different. It'll also go row by row from a PK perspective and tell us what values are changing. Right? This is really important because as we make changes, one vital principle is that no historical data is changing. The great thing about Datafold is that we can sort this data by date and visually show the accounting team that no historical data is changing. Because our system is relatively stable, whenever we go to make changes, we shouldn't be inserting thousands of primary keys. If we are, we've probably done something wrong. We also aren't experiencing thousands of value shift. If we have, we've probably done something wrong. And so it really is like a way for them to put eyes on this. And this is what we actually attach to our tickets, and the accounting team signs off and approves before any quote-to-cash code is pushed into production and made live. So some of the benefits of the system that we've built, instead of having accounting information in Excel or having complicated macros calculate things like deferred revenue, all of this is in GitHub. So we have change control around every single change that's made. We have our ticket tracking tool, which allows us to understand the changes that we made and why. We have a comprehensive test suite that runs with every single CI build and every single daily run. And we also have Datafold diffs that we can show that the changes happened in a way that we expected. Another big one is having a single source of truth for financial information. It is no longer a difficult question for us to understand how much revenue we made in a given month. It is a 2-line query that anyone in our entire company can write. And this data actually powers our BI stack as well. All the quote-to-cash marts are actually in Looker. And so that means that anyone on any team can go into Looker at any given day and pull our revenue figures for a given month or whatever time period they choose to do so. I think this entire process has led to increased communication between analytics engineering, product, and our accounting team. I think before it was really difficult for engineers to understand when they would make a change that would impact accounting. It typically led to accounting saying something like, hey, our payment failures have dramatically decreased. Has a change occurred that led this to happen? And so accounting was sort of looped in after the fact. I think now our engineers are always thinking about quote to cash whenever they're making a change, especially to a revenue tracking feature. And they always now are in the mode of over-communication, which has really helped. I think now the accounting team feels like they're really implemented with like the larger product and engineering team, and they're aware of changes before they are made that may impact the revenue streams. Something that I have really enjoyed is allowing the accounting team to dedicate brainpower elsewhere. They still use lots of Excel spreadsheets, and I think that every accounting team loves Excel, and you're never going to get them totally out of Excel. But now they're using Excel to cross-check what quote-to-cash is outputting, instead of having to work furiously to make sure all the numbers line up going into close. Close is a very stressful time. Close happens, you're familiar with the close process, it typically happens in 4 to 5 days, the first week of the next month. My first experience with close was extremely hectic before we had quote to cash. Accounting was asking all these questions about we have this external data source, here's our internal data, they're not lining up, what's going on, this data point changed, what's happening, and I had no idea, and it was not a very fun experience. I think that this process has really made close a lot less stressful, only because, again, we have a testing suite that runs every single day. And so if there is a bug that is going to impact our accounting team, we know immediately, and we're working with the development team to fix it before month close. We also have made, now that engineering is aware of what the end of month close means, we are no longer shipping products right before end of month close, which selfishly makes me very happy, because anytime something breaks, it is usually myself and the accounting team scrambling at the last minute to fix things. It's first ones to be expected. All good. Yep. So yeah, I think overall, having this quote-to-cash system run in DBT in automated fashion has really improved, hopefully, the lives of a lot of people at Rocket Money. And I think that it's been pretty awesome to have the SOX audit that we just had to just further validate that what we're doing is on the right track. And I left plenty of time for questions, which I wanted to do. I wanted to make sure that we had some extra time. So without further ado, if you have any questions, happy to take them. Yeah, go ahead.
Did you work with the accounting team to develop your test suite in DBT? And it sounds like there might be some redundancy with them running tests at the end of close that you could also incorporate into your DBT test suite, kind of reducing the need for them to, I guess, double check what DBT is already checking frequently.
Yeah, fair enough. So just to make sure everyone can hear, the question was, like, do we work with the accounting team to add tests to DBT to make sure that there aren't any duplicative tests between like what the accounting team is running and what DBT is running? The short answer is yes. The more complicated answer is yes, but accounting, I think, still likes to put eyes on data and ensure things match. Anytime that we do have a new feature, we do work with the accounting team to understand like what additional tests we could be implementing to make sure that things are running in a way that we expect. I think that auditors especially also really, really like humans putting eyes on data. They do like our automated tests, of course. And so I think that the checks that the accounting team does, I think that they will continue to do. And I think it's just another way that we can validate that things are working as expected. And it's something that the auditors really like to see. They really like to see the giant spreadsheet showing that what we have uploaded into Workday, which is an output of quote to cash that is being run by DBT daily, matches what is actually in BigQuery, which is the output of the quote to cash models. Yes.
What's your approach to controlling the scope of the period eligible for being billed? Right? How do you lock the accounting period?
Yeah, that is a great question. So we don't. So every time, the question was, how do we lock the accounting period and make sure that we're only running what needs to be run? Currently, all of our quote to cash models refresh daily. What we have is we actually use DBT snapshots in probably an unorthodox way to make sure that historical data is not changing. So every time that we have an all jobs run, we also have a snapshot that runs from those final quote to cash models. And that will let us know if anything is shifting and if things are shifting, why. The accounting team also does end of quarter and end of year reviews to compare what has been booked into Workday, which is our accounting system of record, with what exists in BigQuery as an output of quote to cash running in DBT to make sure that numbers are lining up. Generally, we have had success, knock on, this isn't wood, but it's close enough, with making sure that things are relatively stable. Yep. Sorry.
Do the auditors ever look at the models, or are they purely comparing data sets in source systems and target systems? Can you walk through that process and how?
Yeah, sure. So the question is, are the auditors actually looking at the models? In our first audit, that answer was no. I think that us having our accounting system automated in this way, I think is newer to our external auditing team. I don't think this is something they're very familiar with. They are working on updating some of their processes. They're very interested in our test suite. And so we are about to get into the audit this year, because everything happens at the end of the year. I think that the audit team will look more specifically at some of our tests. I don't know if they'll dive into the models, because the audit team typically doesn't tend to be too technical. But I do think that they will look at some of the tests that are being run, and if we have exclusions, understanding why those exclusions take place. But really what the audit team is looking for is just like documentation. How we documented the changes, is the accounting team signing off, and like how do we make sure that our data is complete and accurate? And I think that our testing is a huge part of the complete and accuracy check that the auditors are looking for.
How are you sharing your DBT test results with accounting to make that accessible to non-technical users to
Yeah, fair enough. So the question was, how are we sharing our test results with our accounting team members outside of the technical team? So right now, all the tests run in our all jobs run that runs every morning. If there are any test failures, it is the responsibility of our team to actually look into those test failures, and then we communicate out. So instead of having the accounting team actually looking at the test and looking at the SQL logic and trying to figure out what failed and why, we do that legwork, and we go to the accounting team and say, hey, this test failed, here's what it means, and here's how we're working to fix it. And so the accounting team relies on us to communicate to them when something is broken and why. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so no exposure or something like going through to the end report that's saying, hey, that there was a failure that you need to be questioning this state of that.
Correct. Like everything that fails, we correct same day. In a variety of ways, and we make sure the accounting team is aware of how we're correcting it.
Curious how you handle like any manual adjustments accounting wants to make, like if they want to write off some bad debt or something and zero out accounts receivable on some invoices.
Another really great question. So the way that we have done this today is mainly through, so there are two ways that we've done it. The first is that whenever part of our quote-to-cash system estimates what we expect to see from external vendors. In a lot of places, that data can actually match one-to-one, and we have matched one-to-one pretty consistently since the system went live. We have some vendors where, because of what we're reconciling against, it's going to be impossible to get a one-to-one match. And so what our system does is that we estimate to get as close as we can. And then whenever we receive the report from the vendor with actuals, there is logic in quote-to-cash to do that adjustment as soon as we receive actuals. There's another adjustment that can happen if, like, let's say we get something wrong. The way that we've handled that adjustment is through seed files. And so we have seed files do that. I would say that we don't really have that happen that often, thankfully. And so we're not talking about a 1,000-line seed file, right? We're talking about a seed file with a few entries at most. And that's how we've handled it thus far. But it still allows the manual adjustment to be within quote-to-cash versus the accounting team doing a manual adjustment in Workday that then isn't reflected in quote-to-cash, which would make the end-of-year adjustment a little more difficult. Yep.
So earlier on, you posted that you made like the flow chart of breaking down every step that happens. Did you use that when you decided how granular you wanted to get with your DAG itself? Because you said you went with a big DAG to have, so that way it's easy and manageable. Do those kind of overlap with each other to where they're kind of like close to one-to-one, like this step is reflected in this model, so it's easy to track there? Or how did you decide how much to break down each of the models into the building blocks?
Yeah, fair enough. So I think that really the flowchart served as a diagram for us to make sure that we were on the same page about what we were going to build. I think because there are so many different user flows that someone can go through with a revenue stream, I think if we took every step and made that a separate model, we would have 10x the number of models that we have right now. So I think that the approach that we took was to try to get all the logic into, let's say, an invoices mart file. So let's say for premium Stripe, right, we have a premium Stripe invoices mart table that just has the logic for all the invoices that we expect on the accounting side. And so that's what we tried to do first. Whenever that ended up being a little large or a little complicated, we then made a decision to pivot and have more intermediate tables. So I think that the user flow didn't really dictate how the models are going to be built, other than having one model per financial step in the life cycle. But I think that decision was made as we started building and as we started maintaining, and we were like, this thing is really complicated and we hate touching it. We would then break that down into smaller models to make it more manageable.
Were some of these models more data team models, or were they also application models? And if so, how did you get the engineering application teams to make the models in a more sensible way?
Yeah, so they are all data models. I think that the data models themselves pull from production data, which sort of the software engineering team is responsible for, and external sources. I think that our engineering teams have really been partners throughout this entire process, and they have gotten really, really good at over-alerting us, which I really appreciate. And so there are less surprises as we go into end-of-month close. And so I think that this entire process has really made analytics partners with engineering, and now they're just more aware of what we do, why we do it, why they should care, and it's been a really great partnership. Does that answer your question?
Aside from just
Yeah, another great question. My background before analytics engineering is project management, and so I live and breathe process, and I really like making that better. I think that we are still working on refining the process such that like we get better at communication. I think that we have worked to make sure that there are certain steps in the process that engineering needs to alert us. For example, on our engineering team, we have RFCs, requests for comment, for big new product features. And now it's pretty common that we'll see an analytics engineering representative on all those RFCs before they're approved. And that's how we get early insight into what engineering is going to do. Our teams are also embedded with the software development teams. And so no new features should be a surprise. I will say that, as you can imagine, there are always going to be the one-offs where like we're doing something really quickly and like, sorry, just slipped our mind. I think that's where our test suite really comes into play. There have been several instances where our test has failed. We've talked to engineering, and they've been like, oh yeah, sorry, we did that thing and we didn't think it would have any impact. And I think that like that's where having a comprehensive test suite really, really helps.
What kind of test suite do you guys use? Is it just DBT tests, or do you have other things on top of it?
Yeah, we just use DBT tests right now. We have quite a few tests built into the YAML, and then we also have a lot of custom singular tests that are written in a way that they hopefully should be obvious, but it's like, you know, premium AR closest to 0. I think that we've tried to keep all testing within DBT because our analytics stream is very small, and we don't want to have to go and try to look at different sources for finding different test failures and what those means. And so we have tried to keep testing within DBT.
What was the process and timeline like for implementing this new system?
Process and timelines. So I was hired on, and my one job was to go and figure this out. I say from starting until end, it was a 6-month process for getting this up and running. We used this quote-to-cash system to close the books in 2022, and then 2023 was our second year. I'd say that we have tests to ensure that 2021 data looks roughly accurate. I tell everyone that if you go into 2020, enter at your own risk. We really tried to make sure that we were looking at like the freshest data whenever we were building the system out and current use cases.
A quick question about like data fold and generating that. Was the actual like diff of rows, is that done as a part of like your DBT modeling, and then is data fold just a visualization, or is it like a plugin that's kind of looking at your output table and kind of visualizing the difference? I'm curious about how that works.
Yeah, certainly. So Datafold can run within we can run in CI and also in production. And it actually looks at the output of the development table and production, and it does a side-by-side compare. I can't stress the importance of Datafold. Datafold is now part of our SOX process. Someone was like, hey, do you still use Datafold? And I was like, absolutely, it's part of SOX. It can't go anywhere. It's been a really powerful tool, especially because whenever we make quote-to-cash changes, given that it's stable, we're never like revamping an entire table, right? So the modifications that Datafold shows are relatively small, and it is actually viable for someone to put eyes on the data that's changing and make sure that it's what we expect.
You mentioned that it took 6 months to migrate the whole process. I wondered if it was just you or how large the team was, and what are some of the struggles that you went through throughout the migration process?
Yeah, so it was just me, a team of one. Building the thing in DBT, I will say that I had a lot of really great partners. Engineering and product was obviously very vital. When I came on board, I had no idea what Rocket Money was, and so getting up to speed on that was pretty instrumental. And I would say the accounting team. I came from zero accounting background. I didn't know what AR was, what is revenue, right? All that was foreign to me. And so the accounting team really helped. I think that one of the biggest struggles was just the sheer number of use cases that we had to support given the revenue generating features. Every single use case had to be mapped out, and then we had to map that out with the corresponding external sources to make sure that we're getting in the right data. And I think that, again, that step one is the most important and most time-consuming step.
Your company has its own, accounting has its own offshore software. Yes, how does DBT work with that?
Yep. So our accounting team uses Workday for the final, like the source of truth for financial information is submitted into Workday. Right now, DBT doesn't actually talk to Workday. The final output of DBT models is a Workday template. That Workday template is simply outputting a table, and again, it'll run for over all time. And then the accounting team takes that table, dumps it into Excel, and then loads it into Workday. I wouldn't say that automating things into Workday is off the table, but I think that, again, accounting and our auditors really like that in-between step. And so I think that the upload to Workday will probably continue to stay manual for a bit. Yep.
So you do something for the revenue side. Do you do anything similar for the cost side? Or would that not make sense for your business?
What do you mean cost side? Can you explain?
How much a given order costs? What are the costs that contribute to the revenue?
So our system will track like a given invoice, and cash and revenue can be different, right? I think that there are a lot of external costs in terms of just like contractor costs and like team member costs, and that is actually just outside of quote to cash. I think quote to cash's primary responsibility is just tracking invoices, cash, and revenue as they pertain to like our specific products within Rocket Money. Does that make sense?
How do you show from a source table, like one column to the end, like the lineage of that through all the intermediate models?
Yeah, so in terms of lineage, I think that the lineage tool within DBT does a pretty good job of doing that. So within all of our models are connected, and it's all in one project. And so it's pretty easy to show the lineage from like a source table, let's say Stripe, and through the staging tables, intermediate, and the final marks that it outputs.
You ever have to do it on the column level though? So like that shows you the table lineage, right?
Yeah.
But do you ever have to do that on the column level in audit?
We don't have to do it on a column level as much. I would say Datafold actually does have a column level lineage tool that we could use if needed, but there really hasn't been a strong use case for column level lineage.
I'm curious if you bring Workday data back into your data lake and like do any visualizations on like the final output or like validate that what got put into Workday did match the template, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so that is a to-do, and that is really high on my to-do list. Right now, what we do, the checks that we do post-close are very manual. Like it's us looking at the Excel spreadsheet that was uploaded into Workday, looking at what's in BigQuery after today's run, and like making sure numbers match. I think that with the tooling that DBT provides, it would be relatively straightforward to just like dump that data somewhere that DBT can then read, and then have a test that's literally doing a comparison, so that if historical data does change, that we're alerted right away. So straight answers no, but longer answers, I think we can definitely do it, and it's on the roadmap.
How do you maintain historical dimensionality from like a reporting standpoint for like an end user who's looking at like the customer level? Like if a customer was part of a certain segment a year ago, how do you sort of reflect that in the data, but they've since changed dimensionality?
Yeah, so I think that how you're looking at the historical data is really, the short answer is it depends. I think that our finance team likes to look at customer data and cohorting through like a user-created date. And so we can, the user ID is in quote to cash, and so we can pivot all financial data off of that cohort date based on when they were created. A lot of our other financial modeling looks at like the first invoice post-trial, and we can pivot data off of that. But I think all the data that you would need in quote to cash to look at data over a historical time period is there and available for use. Any other questions?
Do you still need to monitor or compare like the BigQuery amounts to like Stripe or Apple? Like with our business, we have to each month log into their portals and make sure that the numbers in BigQuery are aligned with the portal, and that can become quite tedious when you're talking about many vendors.
Yep, fair enough. So we do external reconciliation during month close. And quote to cash is a source of truth, and we compare it to Apple, Google, Stripe, and we have another partner, Deserve. And every single month, for the most part, we do match. I think that we typically look at a matching on an event description basis. We're not going line item by line item, but we're saying, okay, for payments, payment failures, disputes, does quote to cash match the source of truth coming from the external vendor? And so we do that today, and it's a pretty seamless process, and that's actually documentation that has to be done for our new SOX audit. Last question, I think we're out of time. But.
You said your accounting team approves changes to production with quote to cash. So are they consuming like DBT docs to review those changes, or how are you trying to communicate those types of changes to people that may not be technical?
Yeah, so a few things. They will actually look at the shortcut ticket, and they'll review sort of the description of what's there, and then they really rely on the Datafold diff. So with every change that we make on the shortcut ticket, we actually include the Datafold diff. and the accounting team is putting eyes on that diff, and if they have any questions, they can go from there. The accounting team isn't looking at code, they're not looking at DPT, and so that's why data fold is like such an integral part of our process, because that is what the accounting team used to validate that the change is as expected. Okay, I really appreciate all of your time. We went a little over. I appreciate all the questions. I'm around today. I'm in the DBT Slack community. I love chatting about this stuff, and I could go all day long. So if you have any more questions, let me know, and happy to chat further.